Document. Make sure you're documenting how what you're learning applies to something beyond.
My name's Peter Sumpton, and this is the Marketing Study Lab podcast. A podcast for those that are thinking, have thought and are doing, or already have a marketing qualification. But there's a little bit of something for everyone, as we cover a whole host of marketing topics. I chat to some amazing guests, each one a superstar in their own niche. And if you have a burning marketing question already, or after this episode, get in touch. We'll chat it through. peter@marketingstudylab.co.uk, or find me on LinkedIn. The link is in the show notes. If you'd like to leave a review on iTunes, this will really help others find this podcast and spread the marketing word. Now let's get on with today's episode. Just what type of company do you work for? What does it actually mean? Not what you may think, but more about that later. Firstly, let's meet Patrick Ward, currently the Editor-in-Chief at High Speed Experts, a broadband connectivity search engine and IT industry educational platform. Patrick is a writer by trade and has worked extensively across the insurance, real estate, finance, travel, and tech industries, with notable clients including Allianz and Cathay Pacific, and is currently a member of the Forbes Communication Council. Wow. But the main reason I invited Patrick on today is because of his rise through the ranks within the marketing profession, to provide you with an insight into the how, what, and why of a marketing career, a really good marketing career. But first, what I really want to find out is, Patrick, who's a better American football coach? Mike Tomlin, Bill Cowher, or Chuck Noll?
It has to be Chuck. I mean, he got us all right through the steel curtain. That was the original dynasty of Pittsburgh and the dynasty that really set the tone. I mean, don't get me wrong. I grew up with Cowher initially. That was when I first became a Steelers fan in 2003. But then and then obviously on to Mike Tomlin. But I think Chuck was the one who set the tone for the rest of them to come on board.
yeah, absolutely. Very, very good. I think you got on with the Steelers just about the right time, really, with Coach Cowher coming on board. We're talking about the Pittsburgh Steelers, by the way, American football team, for anybody that's wondering what the hell's going on right now.
Well, actually, funny story. The way I got into it was because of my grandfather. He was into American football. He liked the Green Bay Packers, being a big union man. And so when I was deciding, okay, I need a team, and I'm about 7 or 8 at this time. So like a 7 or 8-year-old kid, I go, oh, the Steelers, they have Hines Ward, and he has the same last name as me. And then the colors of them, black and gold, are the same as my school. So they're done and dusted.
No brainer.
That's a lifelong fan right there.
Yeah, I'm 49ers fan. Don't know how that came about. Just was. I think I got into American football at completely the wrong time, to be fair. But never mind. I think let's move it on a little bit before we start talking about Super Bowl rings and all that kind of stuff. What's the story that's brought you to this stage of your career as Editor-in-Chief at High Speed Experts?
Yeah, I think the best way to look at this career path I've gone on is starting when I first started in marketing. So I was working at an advertising agency in Sydney called Beyond D, various different clients, insurance, travel, bit of real estate. And that was where I was starting to cut my teeth as a copywriter. And I was getting to, picking up some skills about marketing, but I was reaching a point of stagnation very quickly. And so I reached the end of my college degree, and I'm thinking, if I stay in this ad agency, I'm going to spend the next 10 years of my life doing the exact same thing. And that just wasn't going to be acceptable to me. I really sort of freaked out. So I thought of a couple of different options, like, do I go to Melbourne? Do I go to London was an option, but eventually I settled, let's give America a crack. So I decided to come to America. First job was marketing for a finance company. Quite honestly, it was the first company that even gave me a shot in America. But, learned something about financial marketing. But at the same time, I realized that marketing is sort of a bedrock of principles. Then applied that to a tech company in app development, and now have moved to High Speed Experts. So High Speed Experts is now the first one in which I'm quote unquote running the show. So it's a consumer comparison website for tech services. And what I like about this particular role is that it's a return, if you will, to the first stage of my career, which is writing. And I say this to all marketers, that it's important to find your style as a marketer. Like, some marketers are better at writing, some are better at data, some are better at graphics or creative. Whatever that is, just find that, and then that's how you should sell yourself. Because you see so many marketers say, well, I do marketing. It's like, well, just look on LinkedIn, for example, type in marketer in your city and you'll get literally thousands of results. So you do have to separate yourself from the pack. And what I've found, because I've been in so many different industries, it was better for me to focus on, well, I use this bedrock of principles with writing as my forefront, and that's what makes me a good marketer.
I absolutely love it, and I think we'll get into that into a bit more detail in a moment. But the fact that it's this mixture of having this bedrock of principles, like you so eloquently put it, but then growing and developing your own niche, your own style, your own personality, how you see the world and how you see marketing, and applying these theories, but not. You can put them in a structured way, but it doesn't have to be, because you need to be creative. You need that layer on top of it. But these are fundamentally the principles that we should all abide by anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. I always say that the biggest asset to my marketing degree was the fact that I did a psychology minor. And that psychology minor, I think, is so, because at the end of the day, what are we trying to do as marketers? We're trying to effectively communicate to an audience. And how do we effectively communicate to them if we don't even understand how the human mind works? I mean, that's really what we're trying to understand. It's the hopes, the dreams, the aspirations, all of those emotions and thought processes go into how a consumer thinks about your product, your brand, you even as a person, right? Like, because at the end of the day, they've got to trust you first before they even trust the company or product that you're selling to them.
So before we go way back and talk about how you actually got into marketing, which you alluded to just at the very start of this conversation, can you just explain what you do now and what an editor-in-chief is?
Yeah, totally. So an editor-in-chief, the way that I like to think about it is the content mastermind, if you will. They're not necessarily going to be the ones writing all the content, but they're going to be the ones that are dictating that content's direction. So with High Speed Experts specifically, I've inherited this site, and ostensibly it's about consumer comparisons in tech services. But now I need to decide, okay, well, what is the particular content that's going to be relevant for our audience, for them to get the most value out of our site? Because at the end of the day, our site, like any sort of publication, whether it's a press publication or whether it's a blog like us, it really only has value if people are reading our content. And why will people read our content? Because it is valuable to them. So I think the thing to understand about an editor-in-chief, as fancy a title as it is it's really just someone who is focused on that end consumer and understanding what types of content should we be putting in front of them to get these people to come to our site as opposed to any other site. So I'll give a quick example. We recently just did a content push for negotiating with your internet service provider, which in a month has already achieved across about 7 different providers #1 or #2 rankings on Google. Now, this is kind of unheard of in the SEO game. Usually you take about 3 to 6 months. But what we'd identified through our research was that there was this real hunger to understand what is a process that a consumer can use to negotiate and get their bill lowered, because it might be similar in the UK, I'm sure it's similar across the world, that internet service providers will pull you in with a good deal and then they'll try and jack up the price the longer you're with them. And so that's the pure play that we did. Now, this isn't necessarily financially good for us, because obviously we get paid by the internet service providers, and we're telling people how can you save money by avoiding internet service providers. But that's kind of the mindset that an editor-in-chief should be going into. This is kind of that separation between editorial and advertising, is that the editorial side should be 100% focused on what is valuable to the consumer at the end of the day, rather than any other particular business goals.
Okay, that's a really good way of thinking about it. Just going back to what you were saying about internet providers and how you can save money and everything. We moved house about a year ago, and quick story here, and I needed to find out my telephone number, the new telephone number. So we installed, I won't say the company, but we got fiber optic into the house, all set up, happy days, needed the telephone number, phoned the company, said, can we have the number for such and such a reason? Can't remember why. Sorry, sir, we can't give you the number. Okay, but it's my house and you've got a line to the house. Yeah, but we have to post it to you. But it's my telephone number. Can't you just... No, we can't give you your own telephone number. So I had to wait a week for them to post my own telephone number to me. If you can get some content around that would be really helpful.
How to avoid postage.
yeah. Save on postage for internet providers. See, you're not adding value to the internet providers. There's a perfect example. They could save thousands.
Exactly.
Brilliant. Okay, let's take a step back. So I want to go through your career and how it grew and developed and all that kind of stuff to give people a real feel to what a marketing career may look like and the pitfalls or the positives and the negatives. So first of all, how did you get into marketing? Was it something you always wanted to do, you fell into, you grew a love for it, or you just found it one day? How did that happen?
Yeah, it's definitely growing a love for it. And I'll backtrack even further to high school. So I did 6 years of Latin at high school, and I credit this. Everyone says, why did you study Latin? It's a dead language. Here's why. Because English classes only taught you how to analyze texts. They didn't actually teach you that much complex grammar. Latin taught me that. Latin taught me all different ways of phrasing things for different emphasis and different, putting different points forward, that made me a good writer. So that was the writing foundation. Then when we hit university, I actually started with economics as a major. It became too maths based, so I put that to one side. I then went to finance. Again, I should have known, too maths based, put that to one side. So I was really looking for a career. I was trying to find the career that would have very people forward, very communication forward, and a lot of interaction. I'm a very social person, and so really what I was trying to find, not so much of I'm passionate about this career, that's what I'm going to do. I was trying to think, what about myself do I most enjoy doing, and what is the career that fits with that? And then through that exploration, that's when I came across marketing. And so it combined this love of words, this interaction with people, this a very strong communication sense. And I think why I fell into marketing now, I think if I'd been maybe 20 years ago, I would have been straight into sales. But I think why I fell into marketing now is that there is enough crossover, thanks to the digital world, between marketing and sales. But at the same time, it's not straight, pushing people to buy. That's always what I felt a little off about with sales, that you were kind of conning people. And that's why I think I went to marketing, because marketing to me still feels like genuine communication, to the point that the person will buy if they see value at the end of the day.
Do you think you make a good salesman?
Well, the funny thing is, so a quick story here. Yeah. At my app developer, before High Speed Experts, I was working for that finance company before them, and I'd built such good relationships that when I left, they said, "You're going to an app developer? We need an app developed." So we had some conversations, and I closed the deal. It never felt like sales, and yet the monetary value of that deal was $160,000. Nice. So it's kind of weird in that way, that when people have said it to me, that you'd make a great salesman, and yet I always say, but I don't like selling. And then I think it was a UK sales coach by the name of Richard Moore who once said, but that's your key. Sales is no longer about selling. And that's the era we're in now. So you are actually good at it. You just don't call it that.
Yeah. So you won a no for selling, and that was over 100,000. So it's not a bad strike rate, really.
Right.
I'd retire then. I'd just retire. Job done.
Yeah. No, I'm done. No more.
So you kind of fell in love with marketing because you gravitated towards it, should I say, because it kind of fitted with your persona. So do you think a formal education is required in marketing, or is learning on the job now the key to success?
It's very much learning on the job. I'm not saying that you won't learn a lot about the bedrock of principles. And that's certainly what the formal education, that was my major, it was my 4-year degree, that provided that. Nevertheless, every bit of success that I've achieved in marketing has been something that I've learned on a job. In fact, one of the biggest things that I say is, say you go and you're a student, you get a marketing internship, get some lessons, and then as soon as you have those lessons and you have the next job, apply them to that. I've got some of my best successes purely from taking an idea or a concept from one industry and then applying it to a completely different industry. Now, some people will say, no, like B2C tactics and B2B tactics should never mix. Well, quite frankly, that's rubbish, because I've seen some of the best B2C tactics, that are very personalized, very much about, telling a brand story to a consumer, and taken it into the B2B space, and it works a treat, because at the end of the day, it's still people buying, whether it's one of those types of marketing, it's still people who are making the purchase at the end. And so I think that's it. It's pretty much in the stage now where if you go and you get an education through something like a digital boot camp, I know a lot of these things like General Assembly and that now exist, where you can do sort of 10-week sprints, or even if you just like cut your teeth learning, doing some, miniature Facebook ads, with very little budget, at least showing some percentage growth. You can use that as leverage to get yourself a job, because now it's not so much that marketing has changed, like the base level of communication is still the same, but the tools and the tactics on top of that have now changed.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a big advocate for learning on the job, learning as you're doing, and also taking these principles that we learn very early on through professional qualifications, say, and tailoring them to whatever we need. So it might not be that we utilize all of a particular model or utilize it in the way it's always been used. But as long as we're producing something at the end of it of value, then it's done its job.
Yeah, and on that point, I think a lot of marketers get tripped up by thinking like, sort of shiny object squirrel syndrome of like going straight after the new tactic or the new platform or whatever. And that's great. That's great to have that innovative mindset. But don't forget that you've got, several, tens of thousands of years of human evolution still underpinning that, right? Like our minds, as much as technology has changed a lot, our minds have not changed that much in the last 50, 100, 1,000 years. So you're still communicating to that same, primitive brain, that gets excited by certain things, afraid of other things. So don't forget that in your marketing just because you've got the fancy new gadget.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. So in terms of your own career progression, were there any fundamentals that you implemented that helped you possibly go from one job to another or grow and develop? I know you mentioned one just in the previous answer.
Yeah, I think the key, and this kind of goes back to my earlier point, but I think the key is to find the type of marketer that you are. And so I've always found that writing is my greatest strength. And so it was easy to use that to pitch the next job, right? So when I went for the finance company, I showed them articles I'd written about for insurance companies, how it was shared on social media. We literally spent a good 30 minutes of the interview just online looking at the different articles that I'd written and me walking through the strategy and how I'd done that. Then when I went to the app developer, I showed all the finance articles that I'd written and, particularly the ones in the fintech space, because that was more related to tech. And so I was able to use that I always tell, and this is not even just marketers, but everything that you do in your career is leverage for the next step. So find the narratives or the stories, if you will, that run through your career and then use it for the next one. And then similarly, now with high-speed experts, it's now leveled up to a sense that it's not just me being known as a writer, but it's now me being known as a personal brand. So obviously I've written for these brands and these companies, but I've now got that additional social proof of I've been a ghostwriter for a CEO who's been featured in Entrepreneur, Forbes, and HubSpot. I myself have now been featured in Forbes, so I can, confidently say I'm a Forbes featured writer. That now takes an even additional step of I've got a really strong selling point of why my marketing should be trusted as opposed to, anyone else's.
So just on that, have you got any more tips for people that are either looking to start or progress throughout marketing and their career in marketing?
Yeah, I think the key, I'll use the writing example because that's kind of the easiest one, but I think I've got a couple of others for designers. So as a writer, it literally is start writing and see whatever blogs you can get yourself published on. And I've always found it, a way of paying it forward, where we had an up-and-coming tech writer offer to write for Dogtown, and I published her like 3 times, and she didn't have any exposure beforehand. Now she can now use those links that, we're placed on our site of her articles for leverage for the next position. There really is, because that's the funny thing. Everyone knows they need to be in content, but not everyone has the time or the resources to be in content. So if you can at least offer, hey, I'd really like to write an article for you. Here's what my specialties are. Let me know if this aligns with you. that's probably, I think, probably one of the only cold emails I still respond to. I don't respond to like anything for like tech services or like lead generation, but if you're offering to write an article and that's it, then I'll respond to that. If you're a designer, I would suggest going on, there are various websites that the names of which escape me at the moment. I think Dribble is one. That a lot of our designers used, where they literally started making, if you will, like faux brand ads. Like they didn't work for those brands necessarily, but by doing those ads in those style, they showed their capabilities of design. And then through that, they're building a portfolio. I mean, that's the thing, is that with the internet, you don't necessarily have to have worked for someone to have a body of work that showcases the skills, right? Because that's at the end of the day what, and I tell this to all like recent grads or even current students, they're going to hire you because you're going to deliver results for them. So start shifting your story, not about like what tasks you do, but how you deliver results. What can you do? Show us what you can do.
I think that's one thing people forget on the CV as well. That it's very task orientated. We did this. I've been part of this. I've been part of that. There's no story behind it. There's no result behind it, and that's the bit that's going to move you forward. It's really interesting that you mention the elements about it's almost doing the stuff before you're even working for somebody to show, and if nothing else, it shows you are interested in that brand and that company. If nothing else, which is
exactly.
Which is really cool. What you just said then was quite vertical. You chose two niches there in writing and graphic design. As a marketer, should we be looking at more niche elements? And like you said, you focus just on writing because that was your core skill, or do we have to become more of a horizontal professional marketer to understand the whole genre?
I think it certainly is more of the horizontal. While I have the bedrock of what I say is I've got one primary marketing skill, which is my writing, but I've got enough graphic design, enough web development, enough email, social, paid like Google AdWords. I've got enough of those skills to do them to a reasonably proficient level. I would not by any I would never say you should hire me exclusively for that, because, a company, quite frankly, if they just hired me for those skills, would be disappointed. But nevertheless, it does give me a holistic view. So I think it is important to be horizontal, but still find that one thing that you're so good at it that when people look at that, whatever that work is, that they go, yep, that's my guy. Like, this person is just going to crush it when it comes to that. Because then everything, all the other secondary things are just like a nice add-on, right? But then they're not the primary purpose. And I think that's really what we're seeing in marketing roles now, is no one wants just mediocre. People want excellence.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I truly believe that everyone has an ability to be excellent at something. There is something, in every grad, there is something right now that you can do so effortlessly because it is so intrinsic to you, right? And I mean, that's what I say with writing. Like, if you ask me to write like thousands and thousands of words on a topic, like right now, I would do it. And it would just naturally flow, right? So find that thing,
mm-hmm.
that element of marketing that flows, and exploit that, because that's going to be your big selling point. But you do still need the other things, that kind of like what we're talking about, is that if you run the risk, if you only know that, of two things. One, obviously, if that skill set, deviates or pivots, then you're left high and dry. And secondly, you do need to have an appreciation of where everything fits, because marketing is no longer linear. It's no longer, I send a message, the person gets nurtured, they buy, done. It is very much an ecosystem where, maybe a person sees one bit of ad copy, then they see an article on the blog, then maybe they go 2 weeks without seeing anything. Then something else triggers their mind of, oh, I needed to revisit that. Like with all those ecosystems, if you don't know how all of that works, at least at a fundamental level, then how do you know how your particular skill set fits in to the wider impact of what you're trying to do with your company? Because otherwise you get like cognitive dissonance, right? Is that the writing team is saying one thing, the graphics team is saying another, PR is saying a different thing to social, is saying a different thing to add, paid advertising, and then suddenly the consumer's left going, well, I don't even know what these guys are on about.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so easy to understand that as a marketer, but trying to explain it to different departments in an organization can be so difficult, because it's almost, we live in this now culture, and that starts to emanate in some businesses that what do you mean that we're going to post some blogs and it's going to be content, and then we'll do a bit of Facebook advertising, and we'll do, but we won't get anything for a couple of weeks or maybe even months while we grow and develop. It's no, we post something on Facebook and then they say they want it. Isn't that right? And it's like, no, like you said, it's a bit here, it's a bit there. But it's understanding where your audience is going to be as well. So you can narrow down that field, but on the same respect, there's not that linear approach, and trying to get that, particularly within sales, is can be quite tricky at times.
Oh, I always actually throw it back on them. In many ways, executives find me a bit odd to deal with, because I very much am forward with challenging them, because I know my expertise, you know your expertise, and I always challenge them. It's like, okay, tell me about a recent purchase you just made. And they'll, usually, like, let's just say a car. It's like, well, did you buy the first car that the car salesman pitched you? No. Well, so why do you think they're going to buy our service? Because we wrote one article. It's the same concept. It's like, you were an independent person, you had different thoughts, you had your own research, you consumed different messaging, you did your own comparison, and then you did a negotiation at the end, and then you decided to buy that car. But just look how long that process is.
Mm-hmm.
And that car only cost you $20,000, and you're telling me we're pitching a product that's $150,000, $200,000. It takes time.
Yeah, click buy now. That's all we need. You mentioned, or you alluded to it earlier, that you are a writer for Forbes within the communication sector. What, in your opinion, should we be considering within the communication space in the coming years?
Very easy. I actually just came off a panel for this, for the Public Relations Society of America. It's AI.
Okay.
It's very much the hot topic at the moment. What I will say is distinguish between the two. So AI is split into two very different things. There's pure AI, which is robots thinking for themselves, and there's pragmatic AI. So pure AI, we're quite a way off. Pragmatic AI is literally a set of patterns that are designed to do a particular task. So I think that the key thing to understand in the communication space is that AI is only going to continue to play a role, and you don't need to necessarily be a tech geek, but you need to understand how AI could help you, because a lot of the solutions that are coming out, they're very user friendly, but it's things like, we're already seeing email subject line analyzers where AI goes through your proposed email subject line, and it works out what is the percentage chance of it getting a response rate as opposed to others, and it compares it against a lot of data. I think that's something that a lot of marketers have struggled with in previous years, of being comfortable with data. But I think it is a necessary skill, and I think it's a necessary skill for two reasons. One, obviously AI is going to pass through this data and give us recommendations, which makes our lives easier. I mean, I'm the first person who says I hate spreadsheets. So if AI is going to do it for me, then that's great. And then the other reason is, as much as data can be scary, it's very valuable, because no longer are we living in this era where marketing was perceived as a cost center. We're actually able to, with attribution, say that, well, no, this person saw this message first and then this, and then, even 3-6 months down the line, that was because of marketing. So yes, sales will still get their credit at the end for closing, but you'll see that our work is, there's a dollar value on it, which justifies our existence. Because too long we've seen in the past, sort of, 10, 20 years ago, where marketing was, the first to go. Any time of, there was a downturn, people go, well, I don't need to spend on marketing. That's just a cost. And we're very much seeing, no, marketing is so integral to a company's success. If you're having lagging sales, you need to double, triple down on marketing, because that's what's going to get you out of the red and, into the black.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Patrick, are you ready for some quick fire questions?
Yeah, let's do it.
Excellent. Name one must-read business book.
I'm going to go really cliche here. It's the 4-Hour Workweek. Not that everyone needs to work off-site, but it teaches you when to outsource, because that's only going to become more important than the next 5 to 10 to 20 years. Knowing what is your core skill set that you can do best, and anything that's outside of that, that's taking up unnecessary amount of time, outsourcing it, whether it's to AI, whether it's to an outsourced team, whether it's to another team member, whatever it is. The 4-Hour Workweek really teaches you how to identify that.
Love it. What was the last thing you Googled?
The Ashes. I've just been following this. I mean, I had to get it in there. I knew I was speaking to a Brit today, so that was after 122 for 8 to pull out that win. Just glorious.
Yeah, we're recording this at the start of August, by the way. So if anybody wants to know what we're talking about, just look up the Ashes and the first test, and you'll understand. But moving very quickly on. What is your most used app at the moment?
LinkedIn, hands down.
Yeah, love it.
It's the first thing I look at when I wake up, and it's the last thing I look at before I go to sleep.
which is bizarre, because it's so it's almost like a brother or sister you love to hate. It's one of I absolutely love it, but there's so many bugs and so many things go wrong with it. But it just draws you in. It's a fantastic platform. Can't explain it. You just need to get on there if you're not.
Absolutely.
What would you want it be for people who are studying at the moment?
Document. Make sure you're documenting how what you're learning applies to something beyond. And packaging that into a narrative. I think too many people, it's great to learn for the sake of learning, but at the end of the day, you need to understand that what you're learning needs to be packaged into a bite-sized story that can be used and deployed when going into that interview, or even on that initial phone screener. If you can do that, if you can master that art of setting up the story, telling the strategy, how you executed, then the result, or how something that you've learned would apply in that situation, that's going to set you so far ahead of the pack when it comes to getting hired.
Absolutely. Final question. If you could tell your 10-year-old self one thing, what would it be?
Stop resenting that your parents are making you be independent. So the reason I say this is that my parents from a very young age they said, look, we'll pay for your food, we'll pay for your housing, and we'll pay for your schooling, but anything else you want, you need to go out and earn the money yourself. So I've held I've held 15 jobs in the last 10 years. Yes, there's been the marketing ones, which is the core, but I've been a bartender, I've worked at a hospital, I've done football refereeing, like all these different jobs. And that fostered this independence, which I think is directly attributable to everything that we've spoken about. Without that independent mindset, I wouldn't have had the confidence to pursue exactly what I wanted to do, and even the confidence to make this jump to America, which ultimately has led to my success now and future success. So yeah, don't resent a 10-year-old Patrick. It's going to pay off.
and it did. If people want to know more about high-speed experts or get in touch with you, where should they go?
So you can either go to highspeedexperts.com or you can follow me on LinkedIn. I honestly respond to LinkedIn better than my emails, which is probably not a great thing. But so it's www.linkedin.com/in/Patrick James Ward, all one word.
Brilliant. I'll put all that in the show notes. And Patrick, just final thing, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been an absolute pleasure. Loved every second of it.
No, this has been amazing. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Patrick, for joining us. Absolute pleasure talking to you, like I've just said. Just want to touch on a couple of takeaways that I got from that chat. Really interesting. The first one being that when you're starting or in the middle of a career, you need a path. It doesn't have to be perfect. But what do you want the next 10 years to be like? Do you have a plan to achieve this? It's like most things. Failing to plan is planning to fail. And when considering career progression, Patrick pointed out that there are 3 things that will help you always: people, communication, and interaction. Which kind of makes sense to me, as these are the 3 things that are essential when implementing a marketing strategy. No brainers. And finally, Patrick reminded us that learning on the job is so important, but don't forget that your marketing qualification will form the bedrock of this learning, which you can then apply to your daily duties. This will not only assist you in becoming a better marketer, but also help you find out what type of marketer you want to become. Got a really interesting tip to finish on here. It's less of a tip and more of information for you to consider when looking at marketing strategies. And it's important as a marketer that we understand what type of company we're marketing. At its core, it can be a number of different things. So what I want to give you is a rundown of these different types that we can associate with a company's core focus that we have to take into consideration when putting any kind of marketing strategy together. So here goes. There's 4 of them in total. The first one is a selling orientation. Now this focuses on the actual selling of what exists rather than satisfying customer needs and wants. Usually the communications are focused around short-term promotions rather than long-term stability. The second is production orientation. This process looks to maximize outputs and thus profit, which is all about economies of scale, quicker, faster, cheaper, an internal approach if you like. The third is product orientation. Whereas production concentrates on economies of scale, the focus here is on the product or service itself, designed to what is thought to be the best solution. This, however, may ignore actual customer tastes and needs, and you may end up focusing your efforts on features and benefits that are just non-essential or not important. Finally, the fourth one is marketing orientation. As you would expect, customer requirements are embedded into all activities. Customers are at the core of everything that is done. The trick here is to understand your market. If this isn't correct, the orientation may fail, as the strategy will simply be incorrect. And just there's one more type I want to cover, which is the 5th and final one, which is societal marketing orientation. So this means a company is looking to balance the needs of its customers, society, and the company itself, which means a more ethical stance on your strategic approach, which is quite prevalent in today's society with things that are going on in the world. So I just wanted to throw that fifth and final one at you. See what you think. Let me know. Thank you so much for joining us today on Marketing Study Lab. It really means the world that you're listening to this out there. And hopefully I've provided you some value. If you're looking to know more about what Marketing Study Lab does and is about, go to marketingstudylab.co.uk or get in touch with me personally, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, or feel free to email me at peter@marketingstudylab.co.uk. Happy marketing.